What is going on, you guys? It's your girl Diana, back at you with another YouTube video. Earlier today, episode 8 of Aim to be a Pokemon Master aired in Japan, so today I'll be giving you my recap and review. And I'm not gonna lie, this was actually a really cute episode. So if you're new here, make sure that you subscribe because it helps you grow out, and give this video a thumbs up so that we can push it out into the YouTube algorithm so that more Pokemon fans can see it. And if you would like another way to support the channel, please feel free to check out the merch store. There is a link down below in the description that takes you to not only my merch store, but also all of my other socials so you can keep up with what I'm doing on a daily basis. But let's go ahead and hop into episode 8.
Bye.
We start off this episode with Ash, Brock, and Misty walking into a new town right around dusk, with Misty sporting a brand new heart-shaped hairpin. This hairpin comes into play later, I promise. But once they get into town, they see Officer Jenny standing in front of a house talking to a crowd of people, and they find out that she's actually investigating a string of burglaries that have been taking place at night, and the house that they're in front of is the one that is currently being broken into. So the gang's like, for sure, we're actually Detective Pikachu, why don't we help you find out who the burglar is? But the three of them and Officer Jenny walk into the house, and we get a nice little callback to the Gen 1 ghost sprites from when you walk into the Pokemon Tower. I'm talking about like the old school ones where you couldn't see if it was like a Ghastly or whatever other ghost Pokemon it was, and it was just that generic ghost shape, which me personally, I love. But the gang notices this ghost kind of flying around the house, when eventually they track it down to a specific room as it's rummaging through the owner's dresser, trying to look for something specific, it seems. And this is where we find out that the ghost Pokemon is actually a Bayonet. They try to stop Bayonet with the help of Gengar and Pikachu, but it manages to slip past them and then proceeds to go into like every single other house in the town, scaring the living daylights out of all of them. I mean, honestly, I'd be pretty terrified too if I saw a Bayonet. Those things are creepy looking. But it looks like the gang is not quite fast enough to keep up with Bayonet, and they're always one step behind, and it manages to escape after basically breaking into every single house in the town. Later that night, however, back at the police station with Officer Jenny, they go over the list of things that Bayonet has actually been stealing. And it turns out there's a common theme for all of the items that it seems to take. That being, they all have something to do with hearts. So it's clearly looking for something heart-shaped. We then cut over to Bayonet carrying its loot of heart-shaped goodies and walking into what seems like a very dilapidated abandoned home, where it adds its recently stolen goodies to its giant pile of other heart-shaped things. We then see it standing in front of a mirror holding all of the heart-shaped items up to its head as if it's trying to look for something to wear. But it seems like none of the items are what Bayonet is actually looking for. We then see a very frustrated Bayonet sitting on the floor as it looks at a picture of a little girl holding a substitute plushie, which we then find out is actually a picture of Bayonet and its old owner. Which this is probably one of the best parts of the episode, is that they actually tied in Bayonet's Pokedex entry into the plot of the episode, since Bayonet's Pokedex entry states that it starts off as a well-loved plushie, that then proceeds to be abandoned. But the gang also finds out this information as well, and so Ash of course is like, well, obviously we need to reunite it with its old owner. That's probably why it's been breaking into houses. So while the gang is trying to come up with a plan outside of the Pokemon Center, Ash and Gengar actually manage to spot Bayonet sitting on top of a roof looking at the picture of its old owner. I would also like to add that they are using like the old school ghost sound whenever a Gengar floats around. Like I'm talking about like way back to the Kanto anime with that very specific ghost sound. I feel like if you watch the original anime, you would know what I'm referring to because it's a very specific like whistle sound, which tickles my brain in just the right way. But the wind manages to blow Bayonet's picture out of its hand, and as it's chasing after the picture, it notices Misty's hairpin, which looks just like the little hairpin that Bayonet used to wear when it was a plushie. So of course, it goes after it. The gang and Bayonet get into a little bit of a tussle, but Bayonet manages to escape. But Ash has Gengar chase after Bayonet to try to get it to come back so that he can tell it that he's trying to help it find its old owner. They then notice that Bayonet actually left behind the picture of its old owner, so now they have a picture to go off of at least. Gengar does lose Bayonet's trail right at the abandoned house and comes back to tell the gang that it was unable to bring it back. We then cut over to Bayonet back in its home, having the cutest flashback I've ever seen, reminiscing about when it was a plushie and how loved it was by its owner, and even remembering when its owner made the little hairpin that it used to wear. But it turns out that its owner and its family were actually moving, and in the midst of moving, Bayonet was actually left behind on accident, so it was never intended for it to be abandoned, which honestly makes it so much sadder because it was literally laying there as a plushie for years until one day it finally became a bayonet, which at that point, of course, it's excited that it can finally move around freely and proceeds to try to find its owner. Keep in mind, at this point, it's been years, so its owner probably doesn't look like it did in the picture. But that doesn't stop Bayonet, because Bayonet doesn't know how much time's passed, so it proceeds to find the closest looking person to the picture. And naturally, the little girl is terrified of Bayonet. I mean, just look at it. That's no plushie. Bayonet is naturally confused as to why the little girl is terrified until it sees its own reflection. However, it gets the bright idea of trying to find the little hairpin so that if it does find its owner, it'll recognize it. It manages to finally find its hairpin in the home. However, it was made out of paper, so the second that it gets picked up, it actually disintegrates. So therefore, that's why ever since that day, Bayonet's been looking for something to replace its broken hairpin, so that it can hopefully reunite with its owner. Which honestly is so sad. This episode is so cute, but so sad at the same time. Like, this poor little plushie just wants to be reunited, and it just wants to find its hairpin so that its owner will recognize it. Ugh, my heart. But we cut over to the gang who is now looking for Bayonet, and they manage to find their way back to the abandoned home, where they find Bayonet's stash of heart-shaped things. And of course, Bayonet. They then proceed to offer Bayonet Misty's hairpin, since they saw that it was exactly what it was looking for. And of course, Bayonet is overjoyed and accepts the gift. They then tell it that they are determined to help it find its owner. And so they take Bayonet back to town with a picture to try to find its owner. Bayonet manages to find a girl that looks similar to its owner, but when it goes up to talk to her, she doesn't recognize it, even with the hairpin. And so Ash and the gang ask if maybe they've seen a girl that looks similar. Meanwhile, Bayonet's literally just going up to every girl that's around similar age to the picture and being like, "Hey, it's me! Do you recognize me? Look at my hairpin!" And so the gang quickly realizes that Bayonet probably doesn't really remember what its owner looks like, since it has been years. Which then it clicks for them that this girl probably isn't that young anymore, since it has been so long since Bayonet has actually seen her. So they're like, well, this is gonna be a lot harder. So they spend the rest of the day just kind of going up to everyone in town, holding up the picture, asking if they've seen a girl that looks similar but is maybe older. But by the end of the day, they still haven't managed to find its owner. And so frustrated, Bayonet flies away to try to find her on its own. But Gengar's not having it. Gengar's a good friend and goes chasing after Bayonet again. However, this time Gengar actually manages to find Bayonet sitting on a train looking at the picture of it and its owner. They have a really cute, touchy moment with Bayonet looking very discouraged but very hopeful that maybe it'll be able to find its owner in a different town. And so we see Bayonet riding off into the distance on the train. Back over with Ash, Brock, and Misty, we see them walking back into the Pokemon Center, where Brock actually comes to the realization that the girl in the picture looks really similar to Nurse Joy. And so they think back to the picture and realize that it actually is Nurse Joy who's in the picture. And so of course they're ecstatic. They've finally found Bayonet's owner. So Ash goes off to try to find Bayonet, but runs into Gengar, who tells him that Bayonet has left town. And so Ash is like, this won't do, and calls out Dragonite to try to chase down the train that Bayonet's on. They do manage to catch up with the train that Bayonet's sitting on and proceed to bring it back to town so that it can be reunited with Nurse Joy. And the second that Nurse Joy sees Bayonet coming towards her with the little hairpin, she has a bunch of flashbacks and remembers how much she used to love it. And they have a really touching and tear-filled reunion. Which of course we then pan up to see that Latios was watching the entire time once again. And so we end off the episode with Nurse Joy keeping Bayonet with her at the Pokemon Center to be her aide, and the gang proceeding to head off to their next adventure. I honestly didn't expect to like this episode as much as I did, especially a couple of minutes in. I was like, nah, I don't know about this one. It seems kind of random. I feel like it's gonna be kind of cheesy or boring, but I was wrong, because I think this might actually be one of my favorite episodes now. I just really like that they made use of the actual lore around Bayonet, and that it was actually a really nice storyline. Was it a completely random episode? Yes. But was it adorable? Also yes. So surprisingly, I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. I did also like that they threw in all the little callbacks to 1, the Gen 1 anime with Gengar's little ghost noise as it floats around, and 2, all the way back to the Gen 1 games with the ghost sprite. We didn't see too many of Ash's Pokemon. I mean, realistically, all we saw was Gengar, Pikachu, and Dragonite, but I feel like for this episode, it did kind of make sense for them to have a smaller crew, since this was definitely a more intimate story. So overall, I really enjoyed this episode, and I think I'm actually gonna give this episode a 9.5 out of 10. But I would love to hear what you guys think of this episode down below in the comments. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this recap and review, and thank you so much to those of you who have joined the channel as members. I appreciate you guys so much. I love you guys, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.